Part 15. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Xiao. Chapter 149. After the strong light shone into the dark night for a moment, the huge explosion that followed immediately drowned everyone's eardrums. A piercing siren sounded. When the dust cleared, two sneaky guys poked their heads out from a distance to take a look. Hiss. Are we playing too big a game? When he saw the bombed fortifications in the distance, like an ugly hole in a beautiful face, Gao Zhou regretted it. As if he could tell what this guy was thinking, Su Tong patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, our enemies have never been those evolvers outside." "That's true." Gao Zhou nodded. These defenses were okay for dealing with the infected, but they were useless against the evolved ones. "Then what are we going to do next?" "Go to support Yangkang," Gao Zhou asked. No, Su Tong's head was like a rattle. He raised his head and looked at the moon covered by dark clouds in the sky. He couldn't help but read a poem: "The moon is dark and the wind is high, and the sky is full of murder and arson." Gao Zhou's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you planning to kill?" "It's not about killing anyone, it's about stealing things. Haven't you heard that ordinary people have super potions? Why don't we have them? If we don't get to, we will lose blood even if we complete the main mission." As soon as Su Tong said this, Gao Zhou silently gave a thumbs up, but then he frowned again. "What should I do with Yangkang? What should I do? He doesn't even give us side tasks, and he still wants us to work for him." Su Tong curled his lips. He was not a kind person, and he didn't do anything good at all. Since he has created such a good opportunity for Yangkang, why can't Yangkang help them attract some firepower? In his opinion, this is fair. Gao Zhou naturally longed for the so-called super potion. When he heard this, he slapped his thigh and said, "Why didn't I think of that?" In fact, the appearance of the main mission seemed to tie them to the camp. Therefore, Gao Zhou would not think about this aspect, but Su Tong is different. He changed his name to Uni, which is obviously to go against the development direction of the script. Maximizing profits is what he wants. The two waited for a while, and when the camp was completely in chaos, they headed towards the scientific research building behind the camp. I saw that this inconspicuous scientific research building was now protected by 3 floors inside and 3 outside. Even in an inconspicuous corner, you can see 3 heavy machine guns mounted on it. With this heavy firepower, even if Su Tong and Gao Zhou wanted to attack by force, they would probably be peeled off even if they didn't die. "Someone's out." Gao Zhou had sharp eyes and grabbed Su Tong. The two of them hid in the bushes. Through the gap in the bushes, they saw a group of people walking out of the building under the protection of guards. "It's him. The one named Wang." Gao Zhou raised his eyebrows slightly and pointed at the man standing behind Song Nuanuan. "He was the person I fought against last time. This guy's strength is about 6 scripts or more. He is very difficult to deal with." Gao Zhou's words were full of fear for this man. In fact, if he hadn't taken advantage of the geographical advantage last time, it would not have been easy to deal with him. However, Su Tong's focus was obviously different from Gao Zhou's. He pointed at the middle-aged man surrounded by the crowd like a moon and asked, "Who is he?" "Him." Gao Zhou glanced at him. "Wang Suzi, the real person in charge of the camp at present, is said to be a businessman himself, but when the apocalypse broke out, he quickly attracted a group of people with his courage in doing business for many years and became the leader of the camp. The supreme leader. Of course, these are all rumors circulating in the camp. In fact, the fact that this guy can rise so quickly must have something to do with Song Nuanuan and the others." Gao Zhou whispered about the difficulties in the initial establishment of the camp. If it weren't for players like them, these people would have been finished long ago. How could they have been given the opportunity to create such a large camp? As the two whispered, the group of people got into the car and left quickly. "Yes. What's up?" Gao Zhou turned around and saw Su Tong looking at him with squinted eyes. The way to get in is that you can't force your way in. Gao Zhou's eyes lit up when he heard this and asked, "What can I do?" However, Su Tong did not answer him. Instead, he glanced up and down Gao Zhou's body. The strange look in his eyes made Gao Zhou feel a little uncomfortable. He quickly asked, "What do you want to do?" "No. I don't like men." Su Tong shook his head seriously, indicating that he was a serious boy. "Go away." Gao Zhou's face darkened and he cursed angrily, "Hurry up and tell me what to do." Su Tong took out the jack mask and threw it to Gao Zhou. Of course he is a man disguised as a woman. Gao Zhou had a big mouth and thought Su Tong would come up with some good ideas. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be such a bad idea. He casually threw the jack mask to Su Tong. "I want to pretend to be you." "Why me? My figure is too different from Song Nuanuan's. Just changing my face is useless. Your figure is very similar to Song Nuanuan's, so I can only wrong you." Gao Zhou shook his head, and just when he was about to refuse, Su Tong had already taken out his trump card, No Eight's head. "Don't forget, if we don't see Li Zhengqing, our reward for the special potion will be in vain, so no matter what, we must go in." Gao Zhou hesitated upon hearing this. But she was still unwilling to accept her fate and defended, "I'm just about the same height as her, but I'm not as exaggerated as her 30-60. You can't let me stuff cotton, can you?" "Need not." Su Tong waved his hand, "Have you forgotten what I do?" As he spoke, he stretched out his sinful hands toward Gao Zhou with an evil smile on his face. "As an origami maker, 1 stick, 2 glues and 3 sticks are my special skills." Su Tong originally had the blessing of paper craftsman's book, and Song Lao taught him that he never hides his secrets, so this craft has already reached the point where he can be used in other people's homes. Of course, we are still a few points behind Song Lao. Don't underestimate these points. These points cannot be made up by talent. It requires years of immersion to continuously optimize the details. In the end, it is often just such a weak difference between angles. You can create a completely different style. But even so, when Su Tong was making the proud pair of steamed buns on Gao Zhou's body every minute, Gao Zhou couldn't help but praise, "What a good craftsmanship, it's so lifelike, without any manipulation. It's a shame." This is not a compliment. When he was a child, he had also been exposed to paper makers. Even if he was not an authentic descendant of the 8th sex, he could still be considered a master within a radius of 10 miles. But compared to Su Tong's technique, the difference is not even 1 point or 2. It can be seen that although Su Tong is a monk halfway, he is also a profound true disciple. At least in actual combat, he is not much worse than him, a corpse exorcist who has been studying systematically since he was a child. It's done. Looking at the prosthetic breast that fit Gao Zhou's body perfectly, Su Tong carefully examined it and felt that except for the slight difference in feel, there was basically no big problem. The two then found another set of women's clothes, asked Gao Zhou to put it on, and put the jack mask on his face. Suddenly, a rough man suddenly transformed into a man who made most of the people in the camp the object of a man's charge in his sleep. But my voice. At this time, Gao Zhou suddenly remembered something, his voice could not change. This is the most deadly reason for Jack Mask. It is precisely for this reason that the value of Jack's mask is so low. After all, no matter how resembling the disguise is, it is a prop that declares one's identity when one opens his mouth, and it can only fool ordinary people. Haha, don't worry, we've already prepared it, Su Tong said, giving a mask to Gao Zhou. So you are here. Before Gao Pei, who had received the mask, understood what was going on, he suddenly heard Song Nuanuan's shout. He was so frightened that he quickly turned around to take a look. However, Song Nuanuan was not seen. How about this? Is this okay? Gao Zhou looked back at Su Tong and saw Su Tong looking at him expressionlessly, but his stomach made the same sound as Song Nuanuan. D. He was a little surprised. He didn't expect Su Tong to be able to do ventriloquism. He couldn't help but ask, "Is this your ability or something?" The result was naturally the words "no comment." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 150. Ms. Wang, this is. The guard looked closely at Wang Qian, wondering why Miss Wang left and came back so quickly. Notice that evolved people may carry new viruses. You should also wear masks, just in case. Wang Qian's voice sounded hoarse than before, but the guards didn't pay attention to it, thinking it was because she was wearing a mask. They were more wary of the unfamiliar face behind Wang Qian. Sensing the guard's alertness, Su Tong immediately continued to imitate Wang Qian's voice and said, "He is Mr. Li Zhenking's friend Uni. You can call to confirm." The guard quickly said that it was not necessary, with Miss Wang as guarantee, "It is not necessary. Please come in." Saying this, he signaled for release. After Su Tong and Gao Zhou entered the building, the guard turned around and dialed the internal phone. "Hello, Professor Li? Miss Wang said that there is a friend of yours named Uni. This building is more like an abandoned medical center than a scientific research building. The scale is not large." Although Su Tong and Gao Zhou don't know the location of the scientific research room, they only need to follow the direction of the guards along the way. Those places that are not guarded by guards are definitely not there. After pushing open the door of the scientific research room, Li Zhengqing had already been waiting for them behind the door. When he saw Su Tong, Li Zhengqing browsed happily. It was obvious that he had a very good impression of Su Tong. "It's you. Speaking of which, after you brought the child to me last time, I wanted to thank you, but I couldn't find the time. I just happened to be here today. We might as well sit down and chat." As he spoke, he stepped forward and took Gao Zhou's arm proactively, causing Gao Zhou to glare. Just when he was about to have a fit, Su Tong hurriedly said, "That's great, I happen to have a good thing too, it's up to you." "Oh." Li Zhengqing raised his eyebrows slightly and said half-jokingly, "It can't be another earth-shattering good thing." "Almost." Su Tong raised his head and smiled, pretending to be mysterious. Seeing him speaking with such confidence, Li Zhengqing couldn't help but feel a little surprised, and hurriedly invited the two of them into the office. After closing the doors and windows, Su Tong took out No 8's head from the prop book. "This is." Li Zhengqing looked at the bloody head and couldn't help but reach out to cover his mouth and nose. He had seen too many human heads, but having a head placed in front of him like this made him somewhat uncomfortable. "The head of the source virus, and I believe that among all the hosts of the source virus, he is the strongest." When he heard the word source virus, Li Zhengqing's heart moved slightly, but he didn't agree with what Su Tong said. "The strongest? The strongest you have ever seen?" Su Tong's eyes were always fixed on Li Zhengqing, and he found that his wandering eyes were actually looking at Gao Zhou's chest. He seemed to be less enthusiastic about the source of the virus than he was when Gao Zhou had a tall paper shell under his clothes. He frowned and suddenly pulled out an axe and struck the head on the table. Puff! The huge force caused the head to be cut and exploded on the spot. A source virus the size of a walnut was like a brilliant ruby, emitting a strange evil light and lighting up the entire conference room. At this moment, Li Zhengqing was dumbfounded. He looked at the source virus with dull eyes and subconsciously reached out to get it. As a result, Su Tong, who had poor eyesight and quick hands, directly took the source virus in his hand, took out a soft cloth and gently wiped off the sticky liquid on it. After being wiped, the source virus was even more dazzling, comparable to the Black Prince's gem in the crown of the king. This undoubtedly made Li Zhengqing, who was sitting in front of him, breathing rapidly. Just now, Su Tong said that this was the strongest virus among the source viruses. He didn't believe it at first, but until now, Li Zhengqing had no choice but to believe what he said. You must know that the source virus taken out from Xiao Chenzi's head was only about the size of a fingernail. The source virus, both in terms of luster and size, was more than 10 times bigger than the one they had. If the one Xiao Chenzi owns is a glass emerald, then this one is the best emerald. The difference between the two is so huge that it is simply unimaginable. Dr. Li, you see, when I brought the child to you last time, I seem to have heard you say that you wanted to repay me. Su Tong played with the source virus in his hands and never mentioned the matter of giving the source virus to him. Instead, he mentioned what happened last time. This made Li Zhengqing curse in his heart, but he could only put an even brighter smile on his face. Of course, I told you that I was too busy, otherwise I would have talked to you about remuneration a long time ago. In fact, he didn't remember saying such a thing, but at this moment, if he didn't show a clear attitude, he was afraid that the unruly guy in front of him would take the gem and leave on the spot. After saying this, Li Zhengqing couldn't help but secretly curse stupidity, but this sentence was not to curse Su Tong but to curse himself. If it weren't for the contempt he showed just now, how could he have caused this trouble? Thinking of this, Li Zhengqing wanted to slap himself, thinking that he might have been too arrogant during this period. Well, I don't have anything else here. Last time they found some semi-finished products of special potions in the military's inventory. I helped to improve them, but it was just a little bit better. I will give them to you later. Upgrade it and it will be treated as the reward from last time. Gao Zhou on the side stared at Su Tong when he heard this, indicating that he should quickly ask for one for himself, otherwise he would be taken advantage of in vain. Helplessly, Su Tong could only say in Wang Qian's voice, "What about me?" It's inevitable, it's inevitable." Li Zhengqing grinned, and his feet under the table rubbed restlessly against Gao Zhou's thigh twice, but then he raised his eyebrows, thinking about how fuzzy he felt. Could he be wearing woolen pants? The lewd look in his eyes made Gao Zhou want to pick up the bench and give him a break. Seeing the veins on Gao Zhou's fists bulging, Su Tong quickly changed the subject. "Professor Li is too polite, so I will just wait here for good news. I believe that Professor Li will not keep me waiting for too long." Seeing Su Tong's attitude of refusing to let go of rabbits, Li Zhengqing had no choice but to nod, motioning for them to wait here, and then hurriedly walked out of the office. As soon as Li Zhengqing stepped forward, Gao Zhou almost overturned the table. "You didn't say you wanted me to sacrifice my color. You have to share this potion with me, and this one, count as my share." Gao Zhou was so aggrieved. He didn't expect that he would be taken advantage of by a man. It's okay, it's okay." Su Tong signaled Gao Zhou to relax and said that he would give him one of the potions later. However, as for the source virus in his hand, he actually did not really intend to give it to Li Zhengqing. On the one hand, Li Zhengqing couldn't come up with anything more valuable to rival the source virus. On the other hand, this source virus is what he relies on to dare to misbehave in the camp. He cannot become a host of the source virus by being a vassal, but what if he eats the source virus directly? So this thing is just a stepping stone for me. And his real purpose in coming to this place was to find out what Song Nuanuan and the others were going to do. After waiting for about 20 minutes, Li Zhengqing walked into the office with a confident look on his face and handed an iron box to Su and Tong. After opening it, there are 2 dark blue potions and an injection gun. Su Tong casually picked up one and put it in his hand to observe carefully. The dark blue potion shone with a hazy fluorescence under the light, and there seemed to be many metals invisible to the naked eye flickering inside. This potion is an independent product of the super potion. The effect is definitely better than the super potion, unless, after you inject this potion, you don't need to inject the super potion at all. At this point, Li Zhengqing seemed to realize that he had said too much, so he laughed and stopped talking. "Okay, Professor Li, Can you tell me more about the super potion you just mentioned? I just came back from a mission outside, and I'm actually still very curious. Su Tong stared at Li Zhengqing. With his delicate thoughts, how could he not detect the meaning of Li Zhengqing's words just now? This. Li Zhengqing looked at Wang Qian, and Gao Zhou nodded in agreement. Okay, actually, the super potion is a filtered version of brain crystals. I won't go into the technical terms. Simply put, it can achieve the same effect as brain crystals, but it will never be infected by the virus contained in the brain crystals. Divided into 3 stages, the first and second doses have been successfully developed, but for the third dose, I can only make one. While Li Zhengqing was speaking, Su Tong had already quietly dropped the potion in his hand into the prop book. Enhanced Genetic Potion, Rare. It was originally an unfinished strengthening potion by the military. Through Professor Li Zhengqing's special technique, the genes of EVA and the source virus were embedded into the specially mixed strengthening potion. After injection, the overall physical fitness will be increased by 20%, dynamic vision will be gained, and normal damage will be quickly restored. There is a 20% chance of awakening the ability independently. There is a 2% chance of rejection. There is a probability of 1 mutation. Note, this item is a rare prop. If you have extra, you can consider selling it to the script library to exchange for special prop cards. Seeing the introduction of this thing, Su Tong finally showed a smile on his face. This was originally his reward for sending the child here, but it seemed that because he had accepted a special plot mission, Li Zhengqing was not very enthusiastic about him. The reward had been delayed until now, and he even suspected that if he had not come to ask for it in person, the reward would have been wasted. Li Zhengqing talked about a lot of the benefits of super potions, and he was talking enthusiastically. Suddenly Su Tong raised his head and asked abruptly, "Now that we have super potions, what will the members of the special forces do?" "Of course, kill them all." After Li Zhengqing finished speaking, he was stunned and said quickly, "This is not what I meant. This is what Qianqian's father meant. Isn't it, Qian?" As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to take Gao Zhou's hand. Gao Zhou could not bear it for a long time. Seeing that he was still extending his hand towards him, he slapped Li Zhengqing in the face with a pot sticker. "It's your uncle. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 151. A person of Li Zhengqing's age, even if he had been injected with a super potion, could not withstand Gao Zhou's angry blow. If a slap didn't break his neck, he was considered strong. He rolled his eyes and fainted on the spot. I guess she was still thinking about why Qianqian's palm suddenly became so big before she fell into coma. "Bah, I'm so used to you." Gao Zhou spat coldly at Li Zhengqing, pulled off the jack mask on his head and threw it to Su Tong. "Get out, no one will let me pretend to be a woman in the future." As he spoke, he tore open his clothes and tore up the paper shell he was wearing with a few random pulls. Su Tong chuckled quietly on the side, as if waiting to see his joke. After taking over Jack's mask, he simply put it on his head. He walked forward and started to take off Li Zhengqing's clothes. As he took them off, he said, "Life is short, why not give it a try? At least it is a life experience. My father often said, don't wait until you are lying in the coffin to start thinking about what you haven't done yet. What's going on?" "Haha, your father is definitely a philanthropic person." Gao Zhuopi responded with a smile. "That's right." Su Tong paused his hand and sighed. "He has dedicated all his life's achievements to the hospital, and he doesn't even have a chance to go out." Hearing this, Gao Zhou was stunned for a moment, and said with a solemn expression, "Doctors like this are rare." "I didn't say he was a doctor." Su Tong raised his head and corrected him with a strange look. Gao Zhou's mouth twitched. Is he the patient? I saw Su Tong put his white coat on his body and said with a smile, yes, he has been ill for many years. I hope the disease will defeat him soon. Gao Zhou. Without further ado, Su Tong picked up the injection gun, placed a medicine on it, aimed it at his arm and injected it, and then threw the other medicine to Gao Zhou. Gao Zhou first threw it into the prop book, then frowned. After a brief moment of thought, he decided to give up injecting the potion. Su Tong ignored this. After all, if something was given to Gao Zhou, it belonged to Gao Zhou. It was his business how to deal with it. After the injection of the medicine, Su Tong immediately felt a chill all over his body. His body temperature dropped a lot, and the pupils of his two eyes immediately shrank a lot. Immediately after, a numbing feeling came over the whole body. The whole person's mental state immediately changed. Originally, due to the passive influence of dark physique, his skin was sickly pale, but now it actually has some blood color. At least it looks not much different from a normal person. It seems that as your physique increases, you will become more resistant to your own negative side. He took out a small knife and lightly scratched the tip of his finger. He saw a drop of blood dripping down his finger, but when he took out the paper and wiped off the blood, he found that the wound had completely healed. It can be seen that the rapid healing effect brought by this gene-enhancing potion is quite good. It has an excellent miraculous effect on such small wounds, but this ability is only for small wounds that are not fatal. For wounds that require medicine to save life, the effect may not be so obvious. But something is always better than nothing. We've got the potion. Let's go support Yang Kong next. Gao Zhou still has a good friendship with Yang Kong, and he didn't forget to consider supporting him at this time. Because according to what Li Zhengqing just said, it seems that all the members of the special team will inevitably die, and this seems to include Yang Kong. There's no rush. You don't know where those special force members are being detained. Going out now is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Let's talk about it. We've already come here. Are you happy to leave like this? What do you mean? Only then did Gao Zhuoji notice that Su Tong had changed his clothes and that the jack mask he had put on his face had changed into Li Zhengqing's appearance at some point. As the saying goes, thieves never steal their money. Don't you want those super potions? Mentioning the super potion, Gao Zhou nodded with gleaming eyes. After the two walked out of the office, Su Tong swaggered into the experimental area with Gao Zhou. Professor, the second batch of super potion has been prepared, but the quantity may not be enough to reach 2,000. When he saw the two of them walking in, the deputy responsible for preparing the medicine immediately ran over and said with a troubled expression on his face. Oh, are the first batch of potions still in stock? Su Tong asked the deputy. Yes, we have reserved 50. The deputy nodded. Then take them all. In addition, 50 of the second dose of super potion will be sent over as well. As for whether it is enough, it doesn't matter. Just take as much as you have first. Special cases will be treated specially. Seeing Su Tong playing Li Zhengqing easily and casually, his tone of voice and relaxed demeanor were almost exactly the same as Li Zhengqing. Gao Zhou, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but wonder if this guy was really a papermaker. How come besides ventriloquism, he even imitates others so closely? Good. After the deputy hurriedly left without doubting him, Su Tong winked at Gao Zhou and signaled that we had made a fortune this time. A total of 100 super potions were quickly delivered. Su Tong picked it up and threw it into the prop book. When he took a look, he couldn't laugh or cry. It turns out that these so-called strengthening potions can 100% strengthen and improve ordinary people, but they are limited to non-player creatures. If you are a player, the increase will be pitifully small. It can only improve the overall constitution by 5%, and there are no other entries. The two potions combined can only increase your strength by 10%, but it is not the entire constitution, but a random increase in your ability. This potion also deserves to be called a super potion? Suddenly he felt like he had been cheated. Fortunately, the only good thing was that these potions could bring out the world of the script. Although the effect is a bit poor, it does not occupy the space in the prop booklet. I believe that if I take it back to an exhibition, I can fetch a good price. Giving half of it to Gao Zhou can be regarded as a reward for his hard work. Professor Li, no, 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 please go and take a look. I heard from outside that the evolvers have rushed in. So fast. Su Tong was a little surprised. According to his estimation, these evolvers would only arrive in a day. He did not expect them to arrive so quickly. So he immediately climbed to the roof with his deputy, Gao Zhou. Suddenly, all he could see was darkness in the distance, and Su Tong saw Yang Hong's figure from a distance. There was no way he was dressed too coquettishly, and his bright red cloak made him look like a target. So much. Seeing the dense number, Gao Zhou even went to Zikao to cool down. At this time, Su Tong suddenly thought of something and asked Gao Zhou, by the way, is the ranger still outside? Yes, his identity was too sensitive, so he was buried halfway up the mountain without letting him in. Gao Zhou nodded, not knowing what Su Tong was going to do. I heard a happy look on Su Tong's face, and said quickly, let him come out, just in time, he can help me determine why they came to this ghost place. No, my stomach really can't hold on anymore. Sorry, let me take it slow. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 152. I just came out of the hospital today and was diagnosed with acute gastritis and gastric ulcer. Hey, I had a painless gastroscopy, under general anesthesia. When I woke up, I found many people around me looking at me strangely. When I asked my wife, I found out that I actually shouted out in a coma. It turns out that this is what it feels like to be fascinated. Farki. I was instantly stunned. Fortunately, I was thick-skinned, so I straightened my clothes and went out. Let me tell you about this copy. I have always wanted to explain, but never had the right opportunity. In fact, the original plan was to write the third copy taking into account the background of the Republic of China, but it was not as good as God, so I suddenly put it on the shelves. Naked is on the shelves, with an initial order of 400, hey, it's painful. There is no other way. In order to survive on this book, I can only risk my life to update it. If I were to write a supernatural route with the Republic of China background, I couldn't guarantee that I would add more updates. I can only temporarily change the writing of zombies, so that the plot is easy to control, the early conflict is strong, and it is convenient to add updates, which is convenient, to be honest. I have one thing to say, I first thought about getting the book evenly ordered so that I can continue writing with peace of mind. Otherwise, if the book is evenly ordered by 400 people, the book will really be finished. There is nothing I can do. The editor wants to provide resources, but the result is that my grades haven't improved at all, so what should I give? Gideon is so deeply involved that good resources are focused upwards. I actually don't like to write such a copy with strong conflict and weak plot, but the plot takes time, and there is no way to explode when writing the plot. Sometimes I even have to delete the manuscript and add updates. Impossible. Last month I updated 280,000 words. It's the end of the month and my body can't bear it anymore. Otherwise, this copy would have been written by the end of last month. But since you've written it, let's write it well. The design of this copy itself is very large, and there are still about 10 chapters left to finish, because there will be a big twist at the end to highlight the theme of the entire story. There will be no more updates this month. On the one hand, I can't bear it, and on the other hand, I'm also thinking about how to bring back the storyline for the next script. In the end, regarding the performance of this book, I actually have nothing to be dissatisfied about. The first order was 400, and now I have ordered 1,700. Thinking about it, it's okay. Even if my grades are not good, I will finish writing slowly, eunuch. Haha, that's impossible. I want to write novels for the rest of my life. It's normal for me to write 2 novels. After finishing one novel, I will make progress on the next one. Finally, I asked for 2 days off to calm down. My stomach was really upset. I took medicine for 2 days and adjusted my daily routine. After all, the dog's life comes first. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 153. Ah. Gao Zhou didn't understand what Su Tong meant. Don't worry, I know that guy very well. Su Tong pointed at Liang Hong in the distance. This guy was wearing a bright red cloak and was extremely coquettish. It was just the right time to ask him what his mission was. Gao Zhou didn't know what Su Tong was thinking, but hearing him speak so confidently, he woke up the ranger's body hidden outside the camp. Anyway, the most he would lose is a corpse. And precisely because it was a corpse, the other evolvers just glanced at him and did not take the initiative to attack him. They allowed the ranger to walk to Liang Hong's huge skeleton chair before he was finally stopped by an evolver. No, 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 I'm here to deliver a message. Uni asked me to come. Gao Zhou hurriedly used the ranger's mouth to transmit the message. Uni. When he heard these 2 words, Liang Hong, who had a tired face, suddenly tightened his pupils, sat up straight from his chair, and stared at the ranger. Where is he? I'm in the city, let's talk. Your main mission shouldn't be to destroy the city. Gao Zhou acted as the microphone between the two and controlled the ranger to pass the words to Liang Hong's ears. Ah! Liang Hong pouted, stood up from the chair, and wanted to point at Su Tong and curse. This guy had done a lot of harm to himself. When he left, he became Yan Niang's blowing bag and tortured him a lot. But once he saw the ranger's dead face, he immediately lost interest. He sat back on the chair, put his chin in his hand and said lazily, "The Queen Mother gave me 2 tasks, one is to bring back the child, and the other is to kill a person." Who? Wang Suzi. Liang Hong read out this very unfamiliar name. Su Tong and Gao Zhou, who were standing on the roof, were both surprised by Liang Hong's answer. If the person they want to kill is Li Zhangqing, they won't be surprised. After all, Li Zhangqing has developed a super potion, so the threat is very huge no matter how you look at it. But Liang Hong's mission was actually to kill Wang Suzi, which puzzled the 2 of them. Who is Wang Suzi? He is just an old guy over 50 years old. Although he holds the title of leader of the human survivor camp, in the final analysis, Su Tong and Gao Zhou don't think he is a big deal. They actually let Liang Hong lead a vast army of evolvers to kill him. Su Tong signaled the ranger to ask about Liang Hong's specific situation. Liang Hong had nothing to hide about this. He probably said that when Yan Niang was promoted to Queen Mother, she saw a glimpse of the future in her sleep. After waking up from his sleep, he summoned Liang Hong and wanted to kill Wang Suzi by name, and he must be killed as soon as possible at all costs. As for what Yan Niang saw, she didn't tell Liang Hong. When he tried to ask, he only got a 3-word answer, which he couldn't tell. So, wouldn't it be nice if we just help kill Wang Suzi? Understanding Liang Hong's purpose, Gao Zhou couldn't help but began to ponder in a low voice. If they assassinated Wang Suzi and Liang Hong completed the mission, there would be no need to attack the human camp. Wouldn't they be able to spend the 48 years peacefully in the camp? Hours later, you completed the main mission and went home easily. Thinking of this, Gao Zhou even felt a little excited, but when he inadvertently looked at Su Tong, his heart suddenly thumped. When he saw the thick layer of haze on Su Tong's face and the flickering eyes, it was like a basin of cold water poured on Gao Zhou's head, causing the smile on his face to gradually fade away. Sure enough, at this time Su Tong raised his head, with a wry smile on his face and said, "It's not that simple. Maybe we will all die." Scare. Gao Zhou was startled, first thinking that Su Tong's words were too exaggerated, but when his eyes touched his, a bad premonition made Gao Zhou's heart sink. He's not being alarmist. Just listen to Su Tong's low-pitched analysis. Faction confrontation, at least in a certain sense, must pay attention to balance. The purpose of so many evolvers is just to kill Wang Suzi, even if those human legions and those heavy in terms of weapon defense. Wang Suzi is not strong enough to compete with a source virus like Liang Hong, but the script is obviously biased towards Liang Hong, which means that Wang Suzi still has an amazing trump card. Gao Zhou felt that what Su Tong said made sense, but then he thought something was wrong. Wait a minute, isn't this a good thing? The stronger Wang Suzi is, the safer we are. Wouldn't it be nice to fish in troubled waters and survive the time? As soon as he said this, he saw Su Tong staring at him with an idiotic look on his face, which made Gao Zhou feel uncomfortable, but he didn't know what he said wrong. "Don't be stupid, the script can let you fish." Su Tong curled his lips, feeling that Gao Zhoujing wanted to eat shit. "My words have another meaning. Our greatest danger does not come from Liang Hong, so the script allows us to survive in the camp for 48 hours. What do you think it means?" Su Tong had said this before, and the repetition of the story now inevitably made Gao Zhou feel a little impatient. However, when he thought about it carefully, he immediately realized something strange about it. "Wait, you mean?" Suddenly he seemed to have thought of something, and he was shocked and said in surprise, "Are we also going to be enemies with Wang Suzi?" "Yes, it's not just us. The entire camp, including Liang Hong's evolvers, all have Wang Suzi as their target." "Hi, why should he?" Gao Zhou took a breath of air. "How strong of a trump card does this have to stand against everyone?" "Don't be so shocked. There is an information gap here. Most people are still on Wang Suzi's side. You know what I mean." Su Tong took a puff of cigar and comforted Gao Zhou. "Then what's next?" Gao Zhou looked into the distance and saw a large number of evolvers being blocked on the bridge. Under the crazy suppression of heavy firepower, those antibacterial bullets were too much for the evolvers. Often after being hit with a shuttle, the body will violently reject it, and even start to go crazy uncontrollably and attack its own kind. Under the bridge. At this time, there was a sudden roar, and 3 flares illuminated the bridge. Under the bridge, densely packed worm-like evolutionaries had crawled all over the bridge. A large number of soldiers on the shore raised their firearms and aimed their firepower at the bottom of the bridge. However, this time the tried and tested antibacterial bullets seemed to have lost their effect. The bullets could not penetrate these evolvers at all. "Let's go," Su Tong called to Gao Zhou, turned around and left. "Where to go?" Gao Zhou turned around and found that Su Tong had jumped down the building. The height of 3 floors was nothing to him, but Gao Zhou was so angry that he cursed. He had not injected a gene-enhancing drug. He jumped from here. "You won't break a leg if you go down there?" Fortunately, he noticed the sewer pipe nearby, and simply held the sewer pipe and slid down it. After following him, he asked Su Tong, "Wang Suzi must be hiding, how can we find him?" "Others don't know, but Yang Kong must know." "Didn't you say you were going to help him?" "Let's go find Yang Kong first." As Su Tong spoke, he called out, "Big Fatty." I saw the fat and slender tentacles carrying the 2 people on their shoulders, and their figures flashed and quickly ran towards the direction where Yang Kong was imprisoned. When the 2 of them arrived, the place was already in a mess. It looks like Yang Kong has successfully rushed out. However, judging from the blood stains and corpses on the ground, his process of rushing out was not smooth. Front. Gao Zhou glanced at the remaining traces on the ground and pointed ahead. At the same time, he saw an extra embroidery needle in his hand. He threw it with his backhand and the embroidery needle immediately penetrated into the heads of the corpses on the ground. The other end of the needle thread was connected to Gao Zhou's ring finger. With a flick of his finger, all the corpses on the ground suddenly disappeared. He stood up on the ground. Su Tong took a closer look and found that the needle and thread were not actually tied to Gao Zhou's ring finger, but passed through the thimble on his ring finger. There was actually a very small thread bucket in his sleeve. The thread bucket was very small and had 5 or 6 threads on it. A slender silver needle. Sensing Su Tong's gaze, Gao Zhou grinned and said, "Chickens and ducks are in the same boat, and you can't understand even if you don't use the tricks." "Oh, that's because you didn't eat enough." Su Tong rolled his eyes at him. He didn't even understand the paper tying business, so he had no intention of stealing his skills. He was just curious about the thread on his wrist. "Chase me." After Gao Zhou finished speaking, these corpses actually chased towards the path ahead, and the two of them followed behind leisurely. When the two of them chased into a corner of the camp, they heard a fierce fight coming from the abandoned office building in front of them. The two looked up and could see dazzling lights shining from the stairwell from time to time. Su Tong looked at each other and saw that with a flick of Gao Zhou's fingers, the corpses immediately rushed into the building. In fact, Yang Kong was at the end of his rope at this moment. Su Tong and Gao Zhou didn't come to support him at all, which made Yang Kong very depressed. He thought that his painting was too obscure or that they really didn't understand. Fortunately, the huge explosion drew away many guards, otherwise it would be difficult for him to break out. After taking a look at his wound, he put his finger in and stirred it a few times to pull out a bullet. This bullet is almost the same as an ordinary bullet, but there is an extra glass marble on the bullet head, which contains antibacterial liquid. The cost of modification is extremely low, but once it is injured, the awakened superpower will be immediately destroyed. Suppress both levels. I thought this was a weapon used to deal with the infected or evolved, but I didn't expect that these bullets actually hit their own people. It's a huge irony when you think about it. Footsteps from all directions were getting closer and closer. Yang Kong knew in his heart that he had no way to run. He sighed secretly, "Wang Suzi, you bastard, I was so blind when I elected you to be the leader." Just when he was about to give it a try, a scream suddenly came, followed by a burst of rapid gunshots in the empty corridor and began to roar wildly. But these bullets are simply wasted on corpses. Gao Zhou sat on Dabai's body, controlling the body to deal with the guards. Occasionally something would slip through the net, but Su Tong could easily deal with it with a lightning strike from his hand. After the two of them got rid of the chasing guards, they found the injured Yang Kong in the corner. After seeing the two of them, Yang Kong felt relieved at first, and then he couldn't help but cursed, "Didn't I tell you to come for support at 3 o'clock? Did you say that? Why didn't I hear it?" Su Tong looked confused and threw a maca syringe and medical gauze to him. Yang Kong picked up the syringe and injected himself first. He had no time to worry about Su Tong and Gao Zhou letting him go. He raised his head and said, "Do me one more favor. Take me to the isolation area at the back. I don't want you to work in vain. There is an escape passage under this camp. I can tell you." Yang Kong also knew the current situation in the camp. There were so many evolved people outside, and they couldn't hold on with just those defenses. There was only a dead end if they stayed in the camp, so he could tell them a safe evacuation route. "No, no, no, how can we leave at this time? We can help you, but we also happen to want to kill someone. You should know where this guy is now." "Who?" Yang Kong looked at Su Tong in confusion. Su Tong blew out a smoke ring and said 3 words slowly, "Wang Suzi." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 154. No. Surprisingly, Yang Kong actually rejected Su Tong and Gao Zhou's proposals. Even though Wang Suzi was unkind to the special teams, Yang Kong did not want to be unjust. From a certain perspective, he could understand Wang Suzi's approach. Most of the people in the special operations team have begun to have auditory hallucinations, and even have an extreme worship of strength and blood. They kept the camp safe, but the camp no longer suited them. What they disagree with is just Wang Suzi's approach, but even if the camp is no longer suitable for them, it doesn't mean they will abandon the camp. Yang Kong raised the gun in his hand and pointed it at Su Tong and Gao Zhou. If you want to kill Wang Suzi, then we are enemies. Listen to me, the target of those evolvers is Wang Suzi. If you kill him, the camp will be safe. Gao Zhou tried to persuade Yang Kong. However, Yang Kong grinned and sneered, then we can't let them succeed. If this is really the case, it means that Wang Suzi is the hero who can lead us to revive humanity. Do you think I will fight back just to survive for a while? Hey, why don't you understand? Wang Suzi. Su Tong suddenly stretched out his hand to stop Gao Zhou from continuing. He looked at Yang Kong in front of him and smiled broadly. Interesting, pedantic enough, I like it. The 9-word evaluation made Gao Zhou and Yang Kong unable to figure out what this guy was thinking. Let's go. As he spoke, he patted the big fat man and motioned for him to set off. Where are you going? Yang Kong immediately became nervous, worried that the two would continue to look for Wang Suzi, and immediately raised his gun and pointed it at Su Tong's back. Su Tong turned his head and asked doubtfully, didn't you just say that you were going to the quarantine area behind? Why did you forget so quickly? Yang Kong was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up, so you are willing to help me? I don't want to, but since you won't say it, we have nothing to do, so we might as well go to the quarantine area and take a look. As he spoke, he took out a cigar in his hand and gave one to Gao Zhou. As a result, Gao Zhou actually pushed it over and took out a large pipe from the prop book. He looked at the cigar in Su Tong's hand with disdain. Real men smoke this to enjoy themselves. The two were talking and laughing, and their relaxed expressions made Yang Kong doubtful for a time, suspecting that they had bad intentions. But at this time, we can only take them to the quarantine area. After all, the guards in the quarantine area still need their help. The quarantine area is not far away from them. On the way, Su Tong was curious about the big smoking pipe in Gao Zhou's hand, so he borrowed it and took a closer look. This thing is made of bamboo. Iron bars are punched through the bamboo joints. A small hole is made in the middle of the bamboo, and a small bamboo tube as big as a finger is inserted diagonally to serve as a cigarette holder. It looked a bit like a pipe, but after shaking it, I found that there was actually water inside. The surface of the bamboo has been covered with a thick layer of patina, which looks a bit jade-like. You can tell it is an old item at a glance. Gao Zhou also enthusiastically filled him with tobacco, saying that it was the best quality product from their hometown, and then lit it for Su Tong and asked him to take a sip. As a result, after taking the sip, Su Tong's eyes became dizzy and his head blurred. He sat on the fat man's shoulder and it took him a minute to recover. This is the result of repeated strengthening of his physique. After regaining consciousness, he looked at the hookah rod in his hand, and he couldn't help but exclaimed in surprise, so powerful? Did you put some drug in it? After saying that, he couldn't help but take another puff. This time he smoked very slowly, even savoring the mellow aroma of the tobacco inside. Even so, it was inevitable that he would be a little bit addicted. Seeing that Su Tong became more and more addicted to smoking, Gao Zhou quickly took the hookah back and said with a smile, if you like it, come to my house next time. I won't play with you. When it comes to hookahs, I am the only one in Xiangzi. The tobacco leaves are the best. Su Tong nodded uncertainly, glanced at the hookah pipe out of the corner of his eye, and when he started to smoke the cigar again, he suddenly felt that it was a little tasteless. While the two were talking for a while, they saw the white steel shed in the quarantine area from a distance. It used to be a factory, but now it has been converted into a quarantine area. Yang Kong originally wanted to be peaceful and took the initiative to explain to the guards, but the guards seemed to have received the order. After seeing Yang Kong, they decisively raised their guns and pulled the trigger. As soon as the gunshot rang out, Big Fatty came to these guards in a blink of an eye. Su Tong raised his hand and swiped the lightning. The guards actually persisted in the lightning for more than 10 seconds before falling to the ground. Before they could get up, Gao Zhou flicked his fingers, and several embroidery needles shot out of the air, piercing the heads of the guards like lightning. The long needles were released and retracted, and the guards immediately fell to the ground unconscious with bleeding from their orifices. With the abilities of Su Tong and Gao Zhou, it was easy to kill these guards who had received the first dose of strengthening potion. With the cooperation of the two, they didn't even need to spend script points. Su Tong also asked jokingly, "Do you have an item card like the Sunflower Book?" "Haha, don't tell me, I actually asked about it, and it turns out that I really have this item card, but it appeared once at the exhibition and never appeared again. Otherwise, I would have joined the ranks of certified players, and I would still be here with you. Do hard work." Gao Zhou had a melancholy look on his face. His strength was not bad, but he couldn't find the key core item card, so his strength was always hovering above the average level among ordinary players. But if one day he can find a core item card that suits him, his strength will definitely double and he will become a top expert among ordinary players, and he can even reach the threshold of certified players. When he mentioned the words certified player, Gao Zhou couldn't help but show a look of yearning on his face, as if in his eyes, only by becoming a certified player could he be considered a real strong person in the script world. To borrow a sentence from an online fantasy novel, all people are nothing but ants under the certification. The two of them were talking and laughing, which made Yang Kong, who was following behind, feel very uncomfortable. When I walked past the corpses of the guards, I saw that their eyelids were still open in anger. I apologized silently in my heart and reached out to close their eyelids. Only when he reached the door of the isolation room did Yang Kong finally get excited, hurriedly stepped forward, and reached out to push the door of the isolation room open. Suddenly, the strong smell of blood hit his face, making Yang Kang's heart tremble. In the blurry darkness in front of him, there seemed to be a pair of eyes slowly staring towards Yang Kang. "Boss!" The familiar shout shocked Yang Kang's heart, and he was about to move forward, but as soon as he lifted his foot, he was pulled over by Su Tong. "What?" Yang Kang pushed Su Tong's hand, but Su Tong's strength was far greater than that of Yang Kang. No matter how much Yang Kang pushed, he couldn't shake Su Tong at all. "Isn't your superpower light? Why don't you illuminate it first and take a closer look?" Faced with Su Tong's doubts, Yang Kang twitched his lips, looked back at the darkness in front of him, and finally plucked up the courage to raise his hands. As the bright light flashed in the palm of his hand, the scene in front of him made Yang Kang tremble all over. I saw a mass of bloody rotten flesh squirming in the darkness in front of me. In the squirming rotten flesh, familiar faces were staring at Yang Kang with wide eyes. "Boss, why don't you come to save us? It was you who asked us to give up resistance. It was you who patted your chest and promised that the camp would give us an explanation. Is this an explanation?" The twisted faces on the flesh and blood uttered angry questions, causing Yang Kang's face to flicker. He opened his mouth and wanted to defend something, but in the end he didn't say a word. He lowered his head silently. His face had turned as green as ink. But the questioning voices behind him continued, and each voice was like a sharp knife piercing his heart. Until a thick tentacle angrily struck Yang Kang. Yang Kang could dodge this blow, but he didn't. He was forcefully knocked away by the tentacle. When Su Tong and Gao Zhou saw this, they had no intention of helping. Su Tong even leaned against the wall next to the door and bet Gao Zhou, I think he can last 3 times, what do you think? 3 strikes? Too few, at least 5 strikes is enough. Gao Zhou looked at Yang Kong, who got up from the ground and whispered. Make a bet. If you lose, I'll give you 100 script points. If you win, how about you give me the hookah? Su Tong crossed his arms and said to Gao Zhou. Upon hearing that Su Tong actually paid attention to his treasure, Gao Zhou immediately shook his head and refused firmly, this is the treasure passed down from my grandfather. Just the patties on the plate will last you 3 generations. You want to bet on this? You need more money. When the two finally settled on 300 scripts as bets, Yang Kong had already been kicked out for the second time. This time it was obviously more brutal than before. From a distance, they could hear the sound of Yang Kong's bones breaking. However, after Yang Kong was whipped to the ground, he still got up silently. With an expressionless face and dull eyes looking at the brothers who were like giant meatballs in front of him, Yang Kong's heart was about to bleed. If he hadn't ordered everyone to put down their weapons, not resist, and follow Wang Zhigzu and others to leave and enter the quarantine area, how could they have ended up like this? He thought he could convince Wang Suzi, but he didn't want it to end up causing such a catastrophe, and he only felt extremely guilty in his heart. Blame me, I'm sorry, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. Yang Kong knelt on the ground, but all he received was a beating from a tentacle. Compared with their pain, admitting their mistake was nothing. The thick tentacles hit Yang Kong's chest hard, causing Yang Kong to fall to the ground, vomiting blood and looking extremely miserable. Just as the 4th tentacle struck down, Su Tong suddenly kicked Yang Kong away. Boom! There was a deafening roar, and the ground was cracked open by the huge force. When the dust cleared, Su Tong was seen standing next to Yang Kong, with one foot on Yang Kong's chest. If an apology is useful, what else should the police do? As he spoke, he walked towards the huge meatball in front of him, looked at it carefully and shook his head. I have seen meatballs bigger than yours. You are still far behind him. But you are here, so you might as well let me help you. What are you going to do? Yang Kong suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Su Tong turned around and grinned at him, guess. After saying that, he suddenly raised his hand and threw the brilliant and evil source virus at the meatball in front of him. Madness and curiosity flashed in his eyes, since you are in so much pain. Then let me see how much trouble you can make movement. I went to bed early today and will start walking at midnight tomorrow. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 155. Don't want. Gao Zhou, who was standing behind to watch the excitement, almost bit off his tongue when he saw this, and rushed forward screaming, but it was too late, and he could only watch the source virus being thrown to this place by Su Tong. Tuan sarcoma. You're crazy. That's the source virus. He stepped forward and grabbed Su Tong's collar with both hands, shaking him wildly. Although he didn't know how Su Tong obtained the source virus, it was not difficult to infer the value of the source virus from Li Zhenking's expression. As Su Tong said, this source virus is enough to become their invincible capital. If they eat it at the last moment, they can change camps at any time and not be attacked by the massive evolvers outside. But now this bastard actually threw such a precious thing to this meatball? Is this guy crazy? Is he sick? Su Tong shook his head, seeming to enjoy the feeling of being shaken. After Gao Zhou roared, he half squinted his eyes and said with a bad smile, don't you think this is more interesting? Asshole, you madman, you're going to destroy the whole camp. Yang Kong roared and got up from the ground, looking at the increasingly swollen meatball, as if on hormones. He raised and put his hands up and down, not knowing where to put his hands at all, using his actions to demonstrate what it means to fight. Nothing to do. He could only glare at the bastard Su Tong with his red eyes. At this time, Su Tong pushed Gao Zhou's hand away, looked at the huge sarcoma in front of him, and asked Yang Kong loudly, "You mean to blame me?" The camp was able to rise safely in the apocalypse because of them, but as a result, the camp didn't even give them a chance to be human beings. You keep saying to help them, but how can you help them? Help with words? Do you have that technology? Since you can't help them, I'm here. I'm willing to give them a choice to see whether they want to destroy everything or help you continue to fight. You. Yang Kong was so angry that his whole body was shaking, but he couldn't refute Su Tong's words. Looking at the increasingly swollen sarcoma, and the faces becoming hideous and hateful under the stimulation of the source virus, Su Tong stood dancing underneath, like a wizard standing under a bonfire. The smile on the thin face became more and more crazy, like a clown who had succeeded in his doomsday carnival. Immediately, his eyes suddenly flashed, and he walked up to Yang Kong and stared at him. "I will also give you a chance. You can try to use your life to make a choice on their behalf." Yang Kong was stunned for a moment, then raised his head and looked at Su Tong in confusion. The two looked at each other for a moment, as if they understood each other's inner thoughts. The corner of Yang Kang's mouth twitched. "Did you plan this all the time?" "It was a spur-of-the-moment idea, because a hero should have a heroic ending. I don't like the ending of redemption and betrayal at all, but you didn't have a choice before. Now I'm giving you a chance to choose. You have to be fast. If you go any slower, I'm afraid you won't be able to make a choice opportunity." When Yang Kong heard this, he curled up his lips and cursed in a low voice, "Madman." After saying that, he stood up and looked at the group of brothers in front of him. Looking at the twisted faces, his heart suddenly tightened as if a needle had pricked him. "Go, your brothers need you now more than ever." Su Tong patted his shoulder and said. Yang Kong felt refreshed when he heard this. He knew that this guy was right, so he took a deep breath. "You are right, heroes should have heroic endings, but don't expect me to thank you. My teacher has taught me since I was a child that a gentleman should have the beauty of adulthood." He bowed slightly, turned sideways to make way, and made a gesture of invitation to Yang Kong, just like a treacherous minister asking a loyal minister to die generously to solve the national crisis, and even did not forget to drop 2 crocodile tears. Yang Kang's eyelids twitched a few times, and he stood up and walked towards the squirming meatball in front of him. Before he could get closer, he saw several slender tentacles coming out of the meatball, wrapping around Yang Kang's body, and then quickly pulled Yang Kong into that pile of rotten meat. Seeing his body being swallowed up continuously, Yang Kong took a deep breath, closed his eyes and recited silently in his heart, "This time, let me lead you to fight for this homeland that is still in its infancy. The last time. What on earth are you doing?" Gao Zhou watched Yang Kang's body gradually disappear into the sarcoma, and finally couldn't help but question Su Tong, knowing that Yang Kong was also their ally. "I." Su Tong looked at Gao Zhou in surprise, and said with an innocent face, "It's none of my business that he wants to die." "Ken." Before Gao Zhou could continue talking nonsense, Su Tong hurriedly pulled him away quickly, and asked as he walked, "Don't worry about this. By the way, how many times did you bet he would endure?" Gao Zhou was too lazy to pay attention to him. When he mentioned this matter, he became even more angry and said, "You cheated. If you don't kick him away, he will get the 4th blow. That would kill him. Dead people have no value. Why don't you let him die in the end? It's different. That's a choice given to him." While the two were arguing, a huge roar suddenly came from behind. When the two looked back, they saw a huge and terrifying tentacle. The tentacle is at least 7 or 8 meters long, and it can be seen that it contains very terrifying power. Countless human arms above are twisting in the air, and looking at the densely packed gray palms, there is a crazy feeling that even the soul is being grabbed. Tentacles stretched out from the factory shed in the quarantine area one after another, twisting like a spiritual snake, and then whipped down with lightning speed. It's hard to describe it as a complete landslide. The entire factory building was instantly shattered like a children's toy spliced together by Lego. Suddenly, everyone suddenly felt a shaking under their feet, and it felt like an earthquake. The huge body gradually revealed his true face in the dark night. That weird head squirmed like liquid, changing into a new face every moment. It wasn't until the face was fixed on Yankong that it finally stabilized. Obviously, as the direct leader of the Special Operations Team and the spiritual leader of the entire Special Operations Team, Yankong had taken the leadership of this monster body just as Su Tong had imagined. Right. I think you did something stupid. Looking at the monster in front of him, cold sweat broke out on Gao Zhou's forehead. The huge sense of oppression made him really feel uneasy and dangerous now. No, you'll know if it's stupid or not when you look down. Su Tong shook his head and sneered, do you really think that Yankong, who turned into a monster, can really choose the target he wants? But now it looks like he has succeeded. As soon as Gao Zhou finished speaking, he suddenly saw a deafening roar coming from Yankong's mouth, and his face was constantly twisting, as if there were many consciousnesses competing with him for dominance. More importantly, Yankong suddenly found that he had a stronger will giving him orders. It was a woman's whisper. The voice was very small, but it was like a supreme will that did not allow him to resist. Because the source of this voice is none other than Mother Emperor Yan Niang. No. Roaring in anger, he twisted his body wildly, and his huge tentacles hit the ground hard. As the tentacles contracted and exerted force, cracks immediately appeared on the iron-hard cement floor. But no matter how he struggled, the will of the Queen Mother would never allow him to resist at all. After angrily destroying all the surrounding buildings, Gao Zhou finally swung his huge body and rushed towards the hinterland of the camp. He knew that Wang Suzi must be hiding at this moment there, a place that absolutely no one would have imagined. Success. Su Tong, who was hiding in the distance, watched Yankong walk in the opposite direction to his target, his fangs finally showing on his face. If you don't want to help me, I will help you and help you become willing to help me. Yankong, who became a monster, can indeed lead the will of the special team members in the monster's body, but similarly, no matter how powerful the source virus is, you are still essentially a subordinate of the Queen Mother, so how can you disobey the Queen Mother's orders? Seeing Yankong frantically destroying all the buildings he could see along the way, Su Tong's smile grew brighter. He looked back at the confused Gao Zhou and said with a bad smile, my teacher also said something else, when you can't solve a problem, just find a way to let others solve the problem. Hey! Such a bastard teacher? Are you sure he has a teaching qualification? Gao Zhou's scalp went numb for a while, wondering if the teacher Su Tong was talking about was an expert in thick black science. Of course, I will definitely introduce him to you if I have the chance, but before that, can you redeem our bet first? Su Tong stared at Gao Zhou with bright eyes, and he couldn't wait to rub his hands together in his palms. The corner of Gao Zhou's mouth twitched a few times, but he couldn't resist this guy, so he could only throw his hookah to him. As soon as he got the hookah, Su Tong immediately started smoking. The huge chimney purred, and the thick cloud of smoke sucked into the mouth, giving people the feeling that the mouth was stuffed with cotton. As the smoke poured out of his nose, Su Tong's mental state became clearer than before. It's almost time. It will be time for us to appear on the stage soon. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 156. Wang Suzi. Angry roars echoed throughout the camp. The sound passed through 3 layers of concrete and reached a basement. Everyone raised their heads and then looked at Wang Suzi. Wang Suzi ignored the looks from everyone. He held the burger in his hand and took a bite of it leisurely. A glass of ice-cold Coke is even slightly chilly. There is a bucket of soaked instant noodles on the side. In the past, he would definitely not eat these things. Just this cup of Coke is enough to increase the power of his diabetes by another level. But now he doesn't care. He doesn't care just as much as the landslide outside. Seeing that he had no intention of responding, everyone continued to work hard. I saw a huge glass jar being slowly pushed out, with various strange instruments connected to the glass jar, and inside the glass jar, there was actually a huge human head. If Yankong saw this head, he would definitely recognize its origin, because he cut off the head with his own hands. No one knows who the other party is, but the other party is the supreme leader who captured the secret military base, and he is also the most difficult person among the evolvers. I remember that in order to kill him, Yankong almost risked his life. Fortunately, he was able to kill this guy without any danger, and at the same time seize all the materials in the entire base, laying an irreplaceable foundation for the rapid establishment of the camp. What I didn't expect was that this guy's head was still here, carefully preserved by Wang Suzi. Wang Suzi finished the burger, greedily licked the ketchup on his fingers, then took a sip of ice-cold Coke, pulled the instant noodles in front of him, and continued to devour. The sound of slurping noodles and the unique fragrance of instant noodles made everyone swallow and spit. If this were not the end of the world, I believe no one would think these things are a big deal, but precisely because they are in the end of the world, they can understand that this delicious food is hard-won. Wang Suzi ate it all at once, beads of sweat already forming on his forehead. He didn't let out a loud cry of joy until he drank all the soup in the noodle bucket. "Father!" Song Nuanuan handed over the moistened hot towel, but Wang Suzi pushed him away. He took off his clothes, and everyone saw that Wang Suzi's chest turned out to be a fierce face. This face has a pig's nose and a tiger's mouth, eyes like copper bells, and actually has two pairs of huge, broad ears. The big mouth opened and chewed in the air, and from time to time it made a roar like a cow. "Dad, actually we can wait a little longer. After Li Zhengqing develops the third super potion, it will be more appropriate." Song Nuanuan persuaded in a low voice. "No, there was a call just now, saying that Li Zhengqing was knocked unconscious. Someone pretended to be you and stole 100 super potions. Xiaoqinzi's source virus was also lost. Damn it, it must be that group of thieves. We should have killed them in the first place." When Song Nuanuan heard this, she couldn't help but curse Su Tong and other pig teammates. They couldn't help but still hindered themselves here. They actually dared to come up with the idea of super potions. It was really disgusting. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look back at the young man behind her viciously, as if blaming him for not killing all these people last time. Sensing Song Nuanuan's eyes, the young man could not help but lower his head in shame, but he did not explain anything about the failure of the last time. He was more like a lone wolf hiding in the corner licking his wounds and summarizing the lessons of the last failure. At the same time, we are also making complete preparations for the next attack. Forget it. 9 out of 10 people are unhappy in life. You can't blame him entirely. Wang Suzi patted Song Nuanuan on the shoulder to reassure her, then led her to an oil painting, pushed the painting away, revealing the safe behind it, and carefully took out a potion from it. "This is the genetic enhancement potion that I asked Li Zhengqing to tailor-make for you. The effect may not be as good as the third super potion that Li Zhengqing mentioned, but it is much better than the first and second doses of super potion. I thought I'll give it to you on your birthday in a while, but now I'd better give it to you in advance." Looking at the medicine handed over, Song Nuanuan's eyes turned red and she hugged Wang Suzi silently. Okay, I'm just going to have a serious illness at most, and I'll get over it. Don't worry." Wang Suzi patted Song Nuanuan's forehead affectionately, and looked a little disappointed when his daughter, who never liked tied hair, now had her long hair tied into a ponytail. Boom. At this time, there was a violent vibration above, and a guard ran in panic. After whispering a few words in Song Nuanuan's ear, Song Nuanuan's expression suddenly became solemn. "Damn it, Yankong actually betrayed us at this time." "You mean Yankong?" Even Wang Suzi was surprised at this time. He didn't think it was a big deal if others betrayed him. Only Yang Kong, a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, betrayed him, which Wang Suzi never expected. Not only that, this guy has now become a big trouble. If he is allowed to tear it down, it won't take long for us to tear this place to pieces. Although this place is said to be resistant to nuclear weapons, according to the guards, Yang Kong, who has turned into a monster, has bulldozed the first floor of the building above. If he continues to dig deeper, it will inevitably cause huge damage to the shelter. When Song Nuanuan said this, she gritted her teeth and said, "I'll go out with Yabo, and kill Yang Kong first no matter what." No. But at this moment, Wang Suzi reached out to hold Song Nuanuan, frowning and said, "It doesn't matter, let Yabo go, just pester him for a while, buy me some time, once I get the password, you still need to come in for the cleaning plan implement." The first words he said were addressed to Yabo, and the second words were addressed to Song Nuanuan. The eyes of this elderly man flashed with kindness and reluctance, which made Song Nuanuan feel uncomfortable. But after hesitating for a moment, he still nodded towards Wang Yabo behind him and told him to pay attention to his safety. After Wang Yabo left, Wang Suzi immediately got ready, walked slowly to the glass jar, nodded to several scientific researchers, and saw them pulling down the switch, and all of a sudden these strange machines started to operate. Wisps of electricity passed through the glass and were injected into the huge head along the wires. As the current gradually began to increase, the expression on the head became more and more painful, and it actually slowly opened its eyes and let out a weird scream. Looking at the head that seemed to be alive, Wang Suzi did not dare to waste time. This experiment had been carried out many times. After the head was awakened many times, the memories stored in his mind had begun to completely blur. If he can't successfully get the password this time, all his plans will come to nothing. I saw the giant face on Wang Suzi's chest slowly opening its mouth, and a strange power began to envelope the head. Soon, a large number of memory fragments in the head began to be sucked into the mouth like a tide. Wang Suzi. With an angry roar, Yang Kong was seen waving his huge tentacles and hitting the mountain in front of him. With a single sweep, the vegetation and rocks on the mountain turned into flat ground. Then a tentacle smashed down, causing the rocks to crack and the ground to shake. It's right here. It's so remote. If you don't have someone to guide you, you won't be able to find it. Not far away, Su Tong and Gao Zhou hid behind and watched. Gao Zhou took out a telescope from nowhere and looked carefully with the telescope. This should be a hiding place for soldiers. In reality, there are many in the mountainous areas around City L. Look at the undeveloped areas in those mountains. You are not allowed to develop them at all, because they contain important military supplies. What kind of treasures can you put inside? Hide it so no one can find it. Su Tong took a few puffs from the hookah and looked around at this inconspicuous low hill. He estimated that all the military supplies in the camp came from here. Take it easy, I'm afraid you'll be beaten to death. Seeing that his hand never left the hookah, Gao Zhou couldn't help but complain in a low voice. But Su Tong didn't care about this. He took 2 puffs of water pipe happily and stretched out his arms comfortably. What a joy it is to live, and what a pain it is to die. Everyone is seeking to survive, but they still cannot escape death in the end. Others might have argued with him about what he said. Gao Zhou was unable to refute it for the moment. After all, they were also people who dealt in the dead. They were not as afraid of death as ordinary people. Even if they walked a lot at night, they would inevitably encounter several unusual ghosts. Looking at his casual look, he couldn't help but frown. He imitated his father's demeanor and warned, "Don't think that you can be fearless if you are not afraid of death. Your master never told you that we must have a share in death, should we have a sense of gratitude for life." This was what his father often warned him about. Because they have seen too much life and death, and after becoming numb to life and death, the thoughts in their minds will often be different from ordinary people. Some people may even become insane and start to fall into the devil's way. It is said that the evil group that defected from the mission sect had problems here. In the end, they became more evil and became public enemies in the martial arts world. This is just like the profession of doctor, which is often an area with high incidence of depression, and even the suicide rate of doctors is far higher than that of other professions. Su Tong was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and then he raised his head and glanced at Gao Zhou. He smashed his mouth and reluctantly put away the hookah. Because Gao Zhou was right, now is not the time for him to really lie down and enjoy it. On the contrary, Wang Suzi and his group had not made any move yet, which really made him feel a strong sense of crisis. He always felt that Wang Suzi was brewing something, and if he didn't make a sound, he would become a blockbuster. Huh. At this time, Su Tong suddenly noticed something. He turned around and saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was Zhang Qiang. This little guy was running wildly on the street with a group of people, as if he was rushing somewhere. "You stay here and watch, I'll come as soon as I can." As Su Tong spoke, he turned around and called out Big Fatty, who quickly disappeared from Gao Zhou's sight. Seeing Su Tong walking away, Gao Zhou sighed and shook his head and said, "Sooner or later, you will fall into the devil's path, but I hope you won't have the same moral character as your master in the end." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 157. Yang Kang's rampage caused chaos inside the camp. Some soldiers rushed towards Yang Kang, while other soldiers tried their best to prevent the army of evolvers from entering the camp. However, after the troops were dispersed, the firepower was instantly reduced by more than half. In an instant, the ground was full of dead and injured people wailing, and the situation was not optimistic. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before the camp was swallowed up by these monsters. Liang Hong sat on the chair, looking at the ranger standing next to him from time to time, hoping to hear Su Tong's opinion, but not wanting to hear this guy's voice. His conflicting psychology made him more and more anxious. Until he felt that no Eights-will was replaced, Liang Hong's mind, which had been lying flat, began to become active again. I saw Liang Hong sitting up from the chair, looking in the direction of Yang Kang. He didn't know what he thought of, and after a deep laugh burst from the corner of his mouth, he rushed towards the bridge in front of him. For a moment, countless bullets focused on him like a rainstorm. Liang Hong spun in mid-air and roared. A terrifying black storm roared up, flicking away countless bullets in an instant. At the same time, the scarlet cloak behind him waved, leaving a bright red light in the air, filling the entire void. Like tearing apart, the next moment appeared behind these warriors. As soon as their feet landed on the ground, 5 beast-like heads under the cloak opened their mouths. Immediately, blood and flesh splattered in the trench. The soldiers did not even have time to scream, and were torn into pieces under these bloody mouths. At this moment, the entire battlefield became a little quiet, and they were all intimidated by Liang Hong's momentum. Fortunately, Liang Hong was not interested in these soldiers. After killing these troublesome guys, he jumped towards Yang Kang. "Rush in the direction where you are. Quick, run this way." On the other side, Zhang Qiang took a few children through the streets and alleys, and managed to avoid the soldiers. However, when they passed through the alleys, they discovered that they had gone the wrong way and entered a dead end. Oops, Zhang Qiang's face changed when he saw this, and he hurriedly led everyone back. However, as soon as he turned around, there was a sudden burst of wind behind him. Before Zhang Qiang realized that there was someone behind him, a big hand grabbed his collar. With a big hand, Zhang Qiang was lifted up from the ground as if he were grabbing an insignificant little ant. Zhang Qiang was so frightened that he trembled in his heart and subconsciously wanted to grab the pistol at his waist. "What are you doing here?" Fortunately, Su Tong's voice came, which shocked Zhang Qiang physically and mentally. He turned around and saw that the little guy's eyes turned red immediately after he recognized Su Tong. "Uncle." Seeing that Zhang Qiang was about to cry, Su Tong covered his mouth. "Now is not the time to reminisce with you, where are you going?" Zhang Qiang realized something, nodded repeatedly, waited for Su Tong to let go of his hand, and said quickly, "Uncle, run quickly, the camp is going to be destroyed." Hearing this, Su Tong put Zhang Qiang down and said with relief, "Actually, if you just hide, the target of those evolvers may not be you." Seeing that he had misunderstood what he meant, Zhang Qiang hurriedly shouted, "No, no, those evolvers are going to die too. We went to the school before, and all the children in the school disappeared. We found them in a principal's office. This." It turned out that since the evolutionary attack, Zhang Qiang had taken a few friends to hide in the school. After all, the school's defense facilities were the best. As a result, when they arrived at the school, they discovered that the huge school was actually empty, with not a single child left. At first they thought the students were hidden in a safe place, so they searched classrooms one by one and found the document in the principal's office. Su Tong picked it up and took a look, only to see a line of large characters written on the document: "Instructions for Clearance Plan Action Specifications." Turning to the page below, there is a complete set of action steps and retreat plan. After flipping through the pages carefully, his expression gradually became heavy. No wonder the Queen Mother must kill Wang Suzi. "Uncle, let's run away quickly." "We won't be able to run away if it's too late." Zhang Qiang naturally hoped to drag Su Tong away together. Su Tong looked at the safe area marked on it, tore off the page and handed it to Zhang Qiang. "I have more important things, so hurry up and go quickly." As he said this, he turned around and kicked the wall in front of him, punching a hole in the wall blocking his way. "But..." Zhang Qiang wanted to say something else, but Su Tong had already turned around and jumped onto the low wall on the side. He climbed up to the roof of the 3-story building in twos and twos. After waving to him to say goodbye, the figure disappeared in front of Zhang Qiang. Looking at the disappearing figure, Zhang Qiang gritted his teeth, his eyes became more determined, and he turned back to the friends behind him and said, "Let's go, believe me, I will definitely lead you to survive." In fact, Su Tong didn't really leave, he just hid in the corner and observed silently, recalling the scene of his first meeting with Zhang Qiang. At that time, the little guy even lied about being Xiaoqinzi in order to survive. Now, not only has he become stronger, but he can even bring inspiration and strength to others. The transformation is gratifying. Thinking about it, if the ranger knew this result, he would be very happy. Seeing Zhang Qiang leading these children to the so-called safe point, Su Tong turned around and walked back to Gao Zhou and asked, "How's it going? Have you found the entrance?" "No. Yang Kong smashed it and buried the entrance instead," Gao Zhou said angrily. While the two were talking, Su Tong suddenly raised his eyebrows, raised his hand and summoned a silver arc to hit behind him. I saw a bloody black wind blowing up in the darkness, blocking all the thunder and lightning. A figure landed steadily on the ground. Su Tong looked at it intently and smiled, "Your outfit is so cool, it is standard, or optional?" Gao Zhou turned around and became nervous. He naturally recognized that the guy in front of him was Liang Hong, who was controlling the evolvers outside. He immediately became vigilant. Su Tong took a look at Liang Hong's equipment and grinned, "If I had known about this benefit, I would have stayed." Liang Hong snorted coldly, pointed at Yang Kong who was not far in front of him and said, "You actually gave me the source virus of number 8 like this. It's a waste. If I had known this, you might as well give it to me. Maybe I can take advantage of it. The strength has been raised to another level. You know, After you left, I received an advancement privilege from the Mother Queen. Now my strength is comparable to that of number 8 in its prime. Liang Hong's palms gently squeezed the void, and a handful of tiny vortexes were spinning between him. Such power almost made him intoxicated. He felt that even the rumored certified players were probably no more powerful than this. You didn't stay, that's your loss. After I complete the main mission, the Queen Mother will give me an ultimate reward. This reward is probably a clue to the golden prop card. You can be envious and hateful. Liang Hong's expression at this time was just like a child showing off after getting a lollipop. On the one hand, he urgently needed this to increase his confidence, because Su Tong left such a deep impression on him that he still had a bad feeling when he was standing in front of Su Tong. On the other hand, I also hoped to see even a little bit of regret on his face. However, he was disappointed. Regardless of the evolutionary privileges or golden props he mentioned, Su Tong showed no interest at all on his face. He narrowed his eyes when he saw that a huge gash had opened in the mountain that Yang kept beating. Right there, rush in with me. As they spoke, the two of them jumped on Big Fat's body, and relied on Big Fat's special passive flash to continuously rush towards the crack. Realizing that he was being ignored, Liang Hong's face flickered for a moment, and then he let out a strange scream, waving the cloak behind him, and his body seemed to be wrapped up in a black wind, like a sharp arrow shooting through the air, and in the blink of an eye it was like a sharp arrow. Surpassed Su Tong and Gao Zhou. Looking at the gap in the mountain in front of him, Liang Hong grinned and sneered, and his figure came to the gap in an instant. Looking through the gap, there is indeed a huge tunnel below. It seems that his target Wang Suzi is hiding here. When he thought of this, he first looked back and saw that Su Tong and Gao Zhou were still behind him. He was not in a hurry, but slowly followed Su Tong's example and took out a cigar and put it to his mouth and started smoking. Da-da-da-da. The sound of hurried footsteps was getting closer and closer from the depths of the tunnel. When Liang Hong looked around, he saw a troop running in uniform steps from one end of the tunnel. He noticed that these humans all had an extraordinary aura, and just by the sound of their footsteps, there would be a feeling of a stormy wave crashing over them. It was obvious that this unit must be the elite soldiers around Wang Suzi. Wang Yibo led the people at the front. When he saw Liang Hong, he immediately raised his palms to signal the soldiers behind him to stop. Naturally, Liang Hong did not recognize Wang Yibo, but he could feel Wang Yibo's aura that was different from ordinary people, and he frowned slightly. I don't care about the choice. Hiss. Taking a deep breath from his cigar, Liang Hong slowly exhaled the smoke, looked at Su and Tong who were hurriedly coming behind him, smiled coldly, and stepped on the gravel into the tunnel. As he walked, he said, "Hurry up. If I hadn't waited for you, I would have started killing people. Come on, let's fight quickly. You guys help me kill the group on the left, and I'll take care of the rest." Su and Tong had just arrived at the crack. After hearing Liang Hong's words, Gao Zhou was very unhappy with Liang Hong's attitude of pretending to be 13, and couldn't help but sarcastically said, "You sound like you can defeat it alone same. Then don't talk nonsense. When the fight breaks out later, don't ask me for help." As he spoke, Liang Hong casually took off his loose clothes, put the cigar in his mouth and took a long puff. Just when Gao Zhou was about to go down into the tunnel, Su Tong, who was standing behind him, suddenly noticed something. He raised his head, his eyes tightened, and he quickly grabbed Gao Zhou and moved away quickly. Boom! Immediately after a huge shaking sound, Yang Kang's tentacles completely collapsed the crack in the tunnel in front of Su Tong and Gao Zhou. Crash la la la. Countless broken stones were flying randomly. When Liang Hong raised his head again, he saw only a piece of collapsed rocks behind him, blocking the tunnel tightly. However, Su Tong and Gao Zhou were not seen, and the corner of his mouth suddenly turned upside down. He couldn't help but twitch a few times. Looking back at least hundreds of pairs of eyes in front of him, staring at him eagerly, he swallowed and took the cigar from the corner of his mouth with trembling hands. Well, how about we challenge each other? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 158. Cough cough cough. Gao Zhou pushed aside the dust and took a closer look. There was no entrance. It was all covered tightly by countless rubbles. If Su Tong hadn't pulled him up just now, he would have been buried underneath now, even if he was a player. With his physique, this is probably a dead end. Hey, we didn't go in, and that idiot didn't come out. Gao Zhou suddenly realized that Liang Hong, the idiot, hadn't come out yet, and couldn't help but gasp slightly. Just now he glanced into the tunnel, and all the soldiers who were armed to the teeth, without even thinking about it, must be the soldiers injected with the second-level super potion. Their combat effectiveness cannot be said to be very strong, but they are definitely far better than the special forces. The most important thing is that there are a lot of them. There are not even 1,000 but 800, plus Wang Yibo, who is a little stronger than himself. The three of them might be able to fight head-on if they join forces, but now he is the only one left. Thinking of this, Gao Zhou couldn't help but mourn Liang Hong for 30 seconds. What should we do now? The entrance has been destroyed. We may not be able to get in. Gao Zhou turned around and looked at Su Tong, only to find that Su Tong was not in a hurry at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, there's more than one entrance. I saw him running down with Gao Zhou, and sure enough he found a hidden door. The door was locked and could not be opened without a password. But after Su Tong fiddled with it a few times, he actually opened the door." "Do you still have the skill?" Gao Zhou was shocked. "Hey, what's so difficult about this? Isn't it all written on it?" he said as he handed the retreat plan he got from Zhang Qiang to Gao Zhou. After Gao Zhou picked it up and looked through it a few times, he was suddenly shocked and screamed, "This guy is crazy. If it were me, I would kill him too." It turns out that according to the instructions in the plan, once a special alert occurs in the camp, all students will be transferred to a safe area as soon as possible. Then the cleaning plan will begin. Wang Suzi will activate the hydrogen bomb in the missile silo behind the camp to attack the entire world. Massive bombing. The lair where the Mother Queen is located must also be one of the targets of the attack. Otherwise, the Mother Queen would not order Liang Hong to lead so many evolvers to attack the camp and kill him at all costs. This naturally includes the ground buildings of the entire camp. In other words, Wang Suzi, a bastard, has no intention of trying to organize a long-term confrontation between humans and infected people. Instead, he plans to use the simplest and crudest method to directly clean the world. The camp is more like a bait and a target, and only a small number of people can actually survive. Seeing this, Gao Zhou broke into a cold sweat. He flipped through a few pages decisively and saw that the passwords for various safe passage entrances were basically universal. "You have this thing for a long time, why didn't you take it out earlier? Do you want us to enter through the crack above?" Gao Zhou asked Su Tong as he walked. In fact, Su Tong didn't originally intend to come in through the crack above, but he didn't want Liang Hong to rush so fast. He originally planned to just go with the flow. Unexpectedly, they were unlucky. As soon as they entered, the road behind them was hit by Yang Kong, causing them to fail to enter. But that's fine. With Liang Hong on top to absorb the firepower of those looking inside, it will be easier for them to move. In fact, after all is said and done, Liang Hong was unlucky. It's finally safe. After closing the door casually, Gao Zhou looked at the huge gates one after another in front of him and couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Because according to the meaning of the main line, as long as they find a safe spot to hide and wait until the task time is over, the main line task will be completed. It's not that simple. Su Tong put Dabai away. This narrow road was not suitable for Dabai's physique. At the same time, he seemed to be aware of what Gao Zhou was thinking and couldn't help but remind him. I always feel that something is not quite right, but I also feel like I don't know what is wrong. Gao Zhou frowned, thought for a moment and then whispered, I understand what you mean, because of Song Nuanuan, right? Su Tong continued walking forward without saying anything. Gao Zhou explained in a low voice, she is definitely not a newbie, but it's not as exaggerated as you think. I heard that one of the players once got a special prop card, and after activating it, 3 consecutive scripts, can get the special blessing of true luck. Speaking of this, Gao Zhou couldn't help but feel envious. It is said that with the blessing of this thing, the goddess of luck will take care of both the plot and identity. As long as the strength is not too weak, he can often complete the dungeon with a huge advantage. Hearing this, Su Tong stopped and looked back at Gao Zhou. You mean, Song Nuanuan should have similar abilities, right? Gao Zhou nodded and said, otherwise she is so lucky. She was Wang Suzi's daughter at the beginning. Gao Zhou's face was filled with envy and hatred when he mentioned this matter, obviously because Song Nuanuan had gained a lot of benefits through this special status. However, Su Tong didn't think so. Instead, he frowned and said, do you know what is the rule that I understand the most after becoming a player? Gao Zhou was caught off guard by the sudden question. He thought about it for a moment and had no idea what the answer would be on his dull face. Seeing this, he did not go around in circles with Gao Zhou, raised 4 fingers and said, exchange of equal value. He doesn't believe that players can obtain a special identity for no reason, nor does he believe that so-called real luck is real luck. Because according to the principle of equivalent exchange, all fruits must have a corresponding price. But there are some costs you can see, such as script points. But there are some things you cannot see. Take the real luck that Gao Zhou envies. Perhaps every time he receives the favor of the goddess of luck, he is sending an accurate coordinate positioning to the broom star. Just waiting for the good luck to pass, the misfortune that makes him miserable begins. This is precisely the scary thing about script space. If you feel happy because of a moment of luck, it's hard to tell whether this luck itself is a trap. Precisely because of this, Su Tong did not take Song Nuanuan's so-called lucky halo to heart. What really made him feel uncomfortable was that the root of the script had deviated from what he had expected. This gave him an intuition that someone was deliberately guiding the direction of the script, and was leading them to a dead end. Gao Zhou was walking behind. Listening to Su Tong's words, he felt as if a hand was gently scratching his scalp. His whole scalp was numb. This made him think of the saying, the real danger is exactly what you can't see. Buzz. At this time, Su Tong pushed open an iron door, and a dim tunnel appeared in front of them. There was a weak green indicator light in the tunnel, but the light was so weak that the light was very poor. Fortunately, he had the assistance of dark vision. You can still see clearly 100 meters away in the tunnel. Although Gao Zhou did not have dark vision, he had excellent hearing. He could tell that there was a patrol not far away when he listened carefully. Why was he so sure it was a patrol? He could tell by the rhythm of footsteps. There are still a lot of people, how can we get in? He looked at Su Tong, rolled up his sleeves and exposed the thread on his wrist. Su Tong thought for a moment and threw the jack mask to Gao Zhou again. Why, let me tell you, if you want my women's clothes again, I will fight you to the death. Gao Zhou's face turned green when he saw Jack's mask. Fortunately, Su Tong did not ask him to play the role of a woman this time, but asked him to play another person, Wang Yabo. This guy is currently being restrained by Liang Hong. Playing his role can save them a lot of trouble. The most important thing is that he has not had direct contact with Wang Yabo, so Gao Zhou is still here. After all, the two of them had fought against each other and had a deep understanding of each other. Hearing that it was not women's clothing, Gao Zhou was relieved and reluctantly agreed. Anyway, it would be easier to just put on a show. After putting the mask on his face and transforming into Wanyabo's appearance, Gao Zhou raised his hand to his mouth, cleared his throat, and walked forward while holding Su Tong's shoulders. The two of them walked into the tunnel. After a few steps, a patrol came out of the corner. After seeing the two of them, they were stunned for a moment, but when they saw clearly that it was Wanyabo, their expressions suddenly relaxed. Without waiting for them to speak, Gao Zhou pushed the person forward and imitated Wanyabo's speaking manner, "Take him to see the leader." It was a completely commanding tone, leaving no room for questioning. But this is precisely Wanyabo's usual style. So even though his voice sounded a little hoarse, several people didn't think much about it, because everyone knew that Wanyabo had a bad temper, was even moody, and everyone followed the principle of doing less rather than doing more, and no one wanted to touch him. This bad guy. I'm afraid Wanyabo never dreamed that his bad temper would become Su Tong's indispensable luck. On the way, they saw and looked at the patrol soldiers wearing exquisite equipment. These people were not only armed to the teeth, but also had an amazing aura. The temples on their foreheads bulged high, and they exuded a chilling aura. They could tell at a glance that these people were it's not something you can train in just 1 or 2 days. Gao Zhou didn't pay attention at first, but when they got closer, Gao Zhou suddenly realized something was wrong. When he took a closer look, he was surprised to find that all these soldiers were corpses. After taking a closer look, I found that each of their pupils had white eyes, and they looked exactly like those infected. Hiss. Seeing this, Gao Zhou suddenly took a breath of air. Who would have thought that the guards guarding such a confidential place were actually a group of infected people? Now he finally began to understand why Su Tong just looked so worried. Because he was in a very good mood right now, there was always a bad feeling swirling around his heart. After following the patrol through an underground corridor, the light suddenly began to brighten. Su Tong was pushed by someone, and what came into view was the huge glass jar. Inside, a bloody head was unconsciously opening its mouth and making a weird low roar. What's strange is that when he saw Su Tong and Gao Zhou walking in, this listless head suddenly seemed to have taken stimulants, roaring crazily at the two people, and kept banging his head on them. On the glass jar. The sound of boom, boom, boom makes people wonder whether the glass jar can withstand this guy's continued knocking. Su Tong originally had no interest in this big head, but as the head continued to hit, he seemed to suddenly remember something. He looked at the head suspiciously, and tapped his thigh a few times with his fingers imitating the frequency of the head hitting. Finally, he actually spelled out 2 words, "Save me."